They say out on the frontier, a man's worth could be measured in cattle, bullets, or land. But one dusty evening in the high plains, a young woman's life was bartered away for 2 tired mules and a weathered rifle. What nobody expected was that her story wouldn't end in despair. Instead, it would turn into one of grit, redemption, and the kind of love that only the untamed West could forge. The year was 1873. The settlement of Dry Creek wasn't much more than a handful of wooden buildings, scattered along a dirt road, with the endless prairie stretching in every direction. Dust hung in the air. Men spat tobacco and bartered livestock, while women carried buckets from the well at the edge of town. Under the faded awning of the general store, a man named Boone Carter made a trade that would leave folks whispering for years. Boone was no stranger to haggling. A rugged cowboy with calloused hands, a sunburned face, and a reputation for fairness. But that day, what caught his eye wasn't a horse or a rifle. It was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 18. Her dress was ragged, her hair tangled, her eyes cast low to avoid the stares of men sizing her up like livestock. Her name was Clara, and her stepfather, a drunk with more debts than dignity, was looking to cut a deal. 2 mules, a Winchester rifle. That's what it cost. Boone. Clara was handed over without ceremony. She stood there, trembling, clutching her torn sleeve as her stepfather walked away with his new rifle slung over his shoulder. Not even looking back, the townsfolk muttered, disgusted. Some pitied Clara. Others figured Boone was just another man taking advantage. But Boone wasn't like the others. He tipped his hat, offered her his hand, and said softly, "Come on, miss. You'll ride with me now." Boone's ranch lay 2 days' ride from town, nestled in a valley where the grass grew tall and the creek ran clear. It wasn't much, a small cabin, a corral, a barn with a sagging roof. But it was Boone's. For Clara, it was more than land. It was the first place, in years where she wasn't treated like a burden. Boone never raised his voice, never laid a hand on her. He gave her space, respect, and something rarer than gold out on the frontier: dignity. Still, Clara struggled. Nights were hardest. She'd wake from dreams of her mother, long gone, or from the sound of her stepfather's drunken rage echoing. In her memory, Boone would hear her crying through the thin cabin walls. He never asked, never pried. He just left a cup of water by her door each morning. Life on the ranch was no easy ride. Boone made sure Clara learned everything. How to milk the cow, patch a fence, mend a saddle. She blistered her hands, stumbled, cursed under her breath, but Boone only chuckled. One day, when she was trying to draw water from the well, the rope snapped and the bucket crashed down with a splash. She sank to the ground, tears of frustration streaking her dust-stained cheeks. Boone crouched beside her, put his hand on her shoulder, and said, "Out here, nobody's useless. Clara, you just gotta learn the land, and I'll teach you, if you'll let me." That was the first time Clara looked him in the eye, and in those quiet brown eyes of his, she didn't see pity. She saw patience, maybe even kindness, but peace never lasted long on the frontier. One summer evening, as the sky burned orange, a trio of riders appeared on the horizon. Rough men with bandanas around their necks, revolvers hanging loose on their belts. They came to the ranch with hard eyes and harder voices. Turns out, Clara's stepfather hadn't been satisfied with 2 mules and a rifle. He'd gone bragging in town, telling folks how he'd traded his useless girl for scraps. The story spread, and these outlaws figured Boone had gotten himself a prize worth taking. Boone stood tall on the porch, one hand resting near his pistol. Clara stood frozen behind him, heart hammering. The leader sneered, "We heard you got yourself a new ranch hand, Carter. Maybe we'll take her off your hands." Boone's voice was steady. "Ain't gonna happen. You boys best ride on." But outlaws weren't known for walking away. That night, Boone and Clara fought for their lives. Shots cracked through the valley, horses screamed, and the air filled with smoke and dust. Boone took a bullet to the shoulder, but he held the line, firing back with the same rifle he had traded for Clara. And when one outlaw tried to grab her, Clara grabbed a kitchen knife and fought back with every ounce of fury inside her. By dawn, 2 men lay bleeding in the dirt. The third fled into the hills, swearing revenge. Boone, pale and sweating, slumped against the porch rail. Clara tore strips from her dress to bind his wound, her hands trembling. For the first time, Boone looked at her not as a girl he'd rescued, but as a woman who had saved him too. The days that followed were slow and quiet. Boone's wound healed, but he couldn't work the ranch the way he used to. Clara took charge. She hauled water, mended fences, and even broke in one of the mules. Boone watched from the porch, pride shining in his weary eyes. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Boone finally spoke what had been on his mind. "Clara, I ain't ever seen someone fight like you did. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve more than being passed around like a coin." She looked at him, unsure. Boone cleared his throat, awkward as a schoolboy. "I ain't rich, and I sure as hell ain't fancy. But if you'd let me, I'd give you my name and my home. Not as a bargain, but as a promise." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't taken from her. Someone was offering. She whispered back, "Boone, I'd be proud to carry your name." When the preacher came riding through weeks later, Boone and Clara stood in front of the cabin, hands clasped. It wasn't a grand wedding, no white dress, no music, no crowd. Just 2 people, scarred by the past, choosing each other under the wide western sky. From that day forward, Clara wasn't the girl who'd been traded for mules and a rifle. She was Clara Carter, wife of Boone Carter, co-owner of the Carter Ranch, and together they built something worth more than land, more than cattle, more than gold. They built a life. On the frontier, life was harsh, cruel, and often short. But every so often, a story rose from the dust, a story of a cowboy and a girl who refused to be broken. They say, Boone Carter never sold that old Winchester. He kept it hanging over the mantel as a reminder of the day he made a trade, and the day that trade turned into the greatest blessing of his life. And Clara, she never forgot the moment she chose to take his hand. Because sometimes the West didn't just steal lives. Sometimes it gave them back.